Welcome to Hamster NBC. I'm Perez the Hamster. This is Kids Ask Why, the show where curious kids ask big questions, and the answers surprise not only kids, but parents too. Today's question is a special one, so listen closely and stay curious. And before we begin, remember to watch till the very end, because a long-awaited bedtime story is waiting for you. A calm story, a cozy story, made especially for a quiet, peaceful night. Why can't you divide by 0? Imagine a math lesson. The teacher writes on the board, "You can't divide by 0." And almost all the kids just nod. Cant means can't. But if you think about it, what if you try? Maybe math just doesn't want to reveal its secret? Let's figure it out. First, let's remember what division is. If you have 8 candies and 4 friends, you divide the candies equally. Each gets 2. It's all fair. But math looks at it a little differently. When you write 8, 4, you're really asking, what number do you multiply by 4 to get 8? So 8. 4 is just a shorthand for the problem. 4 times x equals 8. You need to find a number x that works. And we know the answer, it's 2. It's simple. Now imagine someone writes 5, 0. What does that mean? It means find a number that, when multiplied by 0, gives 5. Let's write this as a problem. 0 times x equals 5. And here's where the magic begins. No matter what number you take, 1, 10, 100, a million, if you multiply it by 0, you always hit 0. Always. 0 is a special number. It zeroes out everything it touches when multiplying. But we need to get 5. And 0 times any number only gives 0. So, such a number simply doesn't exist. The problem has no answer. And if there's no answer, writing 5 to 0 means nothing. It's like a question with no possible solution. And that's why they say, you can't divide by 0. But wait, what if we try this another way? What about 0, 0? Now the problem looks like this. 0 times x equals 0. And here's where the real mystery begins. If you take x equals 0, you get 0 times 0 equals 0. That works. If you take x equals 1, you get 0 times 1 equals 0. Also works if you take x equals 57. 0 times 57 equals 0. Also works. So, any number works. But if all work, that means we can't choose just one. Imagine being asked, what is 0? 0. And there are infinitely many correct answers at once. But in mathematics, that's not possible. There must be only one answer. If it can't be defined precisely, then the expression is meaningless. So here's a surprising thing. When we divide 5 by 0, there's no answer at all. When we divide 0 by 0, there are too many answers. And in both cases, division stops working. 0 acts like a special guard at the entrance to the world of numbers. It allows you to add it. It allows you to subtract it. But as soon as it comes to division, it says, stop. And now the main answer. Why can't you divide by 0? Because division is finding a number that, when multiplied, produces the desired result. And when multiplying by 0, you can never get a number other than 0. And if we divide 0 by 0, we get an infinite number of possible answers. That is, in one case, there is no solution, and in the other, there are too many. And that's precisely why mathematics strictly dictates you can't divide by 0. And this is where real mathematics begins. Because behind this simple school rule lies a whole world of logic, strict definitions, and astonishing numerical laws. And now the day is slowly drawing to a close. The noise grows quieter. Thoughts slow down. And it's time for storytelling. But before we begin, let's do one small but important thing. If you enjoy learning new things, if you enjoy listening to stories before bed, and if you want to come back again, subscribe to the Hamster NBC channel and like this video. This way, you'll help us create even more kind stories and clear explanations for children all over the world. Now, get comfortable. History is waiting for you. Once upon a time, in a cozy little cottage, lived a kind woman. Her greatest wish was to have a child, a tiny little one to love. She sought help from an old, wise witch, known for her magical remedies. The witch, understanding her heart, gave her a magical barley grain. "Plant this," the witch advised, "and your wish shall bloom." The woman carefully planted the grain in a pot filled with rich, dark soil. Soon, a magnificent flower began to sprout, growing taller each day. It was unlike any flower she had ever seen, large and incredibly beautiful. One morning, the petals slowly unfurled, revealing a wondrous sight. Inside, nestled gently, was a tiny, perfect girl, no bigger than her thumb. The woman named her Thumbelina and loved her with all her heart. Thumbelina's home was a cozy nutshell, a perfect cradle for her tiny form. Her soft rose petals served as her blanket, keeping her warm and snug. During the day, she played on a grand table, a vast world to explore. A plate of water became her lake, where she sailed on a tulip petal boat. She used horsehairs to guide her vessel, a tiny adventurer, on a grand journey. And when she sang, her voice was tender and beautiful, like a tiny bird. Her days were filled with joy, music, and the warmth of her mother's love. But one night, a shadow fell upon her peaceful world. A huge, ugly toad, with bulging eyes, crawled through the open window. Her slimy gaze fell upon the sleeping Thumbelina, a wicked thought forming. "She will make a perfect wife for my son," croaked the toad with glee. Without a moment's hesitation, she snatched the nutshell cradle. Then, with a clumsy leap, she jumped out the window into the dark night. She landed with a splash in the milky, swampy river, carrying her prize. Deep in the mud by the river lived the old toad and her equally ugly son. The son, a truly disgusting creature, could only croak, "Cox, cox, breck." The old toad had a plan to secure her son's future bride. She placed Thumbelina, still in her nutshell, onto a water lily pad. This way, she couldn't escape while they prepared their muddy nest. Thumbelina awoke to find herself stranded, surrounded by endless water. She cried bitterly, her tiny voice lost in the vastness of the river. Soon, the old toad and her son returned, their faces full of anticipation. They showed Thumbelina her. They even took her precious nutshell crib, leaving her truly alone. Thumbelina cried, her heart filled with despair, refusing to marry the toad's son. But hope arrived in the form of tiny, compassionate fish. Feeling sorry for her plight, they began to gnaw at the lily pad's stem. With a gentle snap, the stem broke, setting Thumbelina free. The leaf, carrying Thumbelina, floated downstream, away from the toads. A new journey began, past lovely places filled with vibrant nature. Birds sang sweet melodies, celebrating her beauty and newfound freedom. A beautiful white butterfly fluttered gracefully around her, a friendly companion. Thumbelina had an idea to make her journey faster and more exciting. She carefully tied her belt to the butterfly, harnessing its gentle power. The butterfly pulled her leaf, making it glide swiftly across the water. But her adventure took another unexpected turn. A large maybug, with buzzing wings, flew by its eyes on Thumbelina. It swooped down, grabbing her by her tiny waist with its strong paws. Up, up, and away they flew, leaving the butterfly and leaf behind. The maybug carried her to a tall, leafy tree, a new, unknown world. Thumbelina's journey was far from over, filled with more wonders and challenges. Her tiny heart was brave, ready for whatever adventures lay ahead. Oh, how frightened the poor little thing was when the beetle grabbed her and flew up the tree. She felt sorry for the cute little butterfly she'd tied to the leaf. It would now starve to death. But the May beetle wasn't worried. He sat down with her on a large green leaf, fed her sweet flower juice. He told her how adorable she was, even though she didn't look like a May beetle at all. Then other May beetles, who lived on the same tree, Kametobi seat, they looked her over. The lady beetles twitched their antennae and said, "She only has 2 legs. It's a shame. What a thin waist she has. Oh, she's just like a human being. How ugly," all the female beetles said. The maybug who brought her was also very fond of her at first, but then he, too, suddenly found her ugly. He didn't want to keep her anymore, let her go where she wanted. He flew down from the tree with her and set her on a daisy. Then the girl began to cry about how ugly she was. Even the Maybugs didn't want to keep her, but in reality, she was the most charming creature. Thumbelina lived all summer alone in the forest. She wove herself a cradle and hung it under a large burdock leaf where the rain couldn't reach her. The little one ate sweet pollen and drank the dew she found on the leaves every morning. Thus summer and autumn passed, but then winter approached, long and cold. All the songbirds had flown away. The bushes and flowers had withered. The large burdock leaf, under which Thumbelina lived, had turned yellow, dried up, and curled up. The little one herself was freezing. Her dress was all torn, and she was so small and delicate. She could freeze, that was all. Snow had begun to fall, and every snowflake was like a whole shovel of snow to us. We're big, after all, and she was only an inch long. She wrapped herself in a dry leaf. But it didn't warm her at all, and the poor thing was shivering like a leaf. Near the forest, where she found herself, lay a large field. The grain had long since been harvested, leaving only bare, dry stalks sticking out of the frozen ground. For Thumbelina, it was a whole forest. Ugh, how she shivered from the cold. And so the poor little thing came to the field mouse's door. The door was a tiny hole covered with dry stalks and blades of grass. The field mouse lived in warmth and comfort. All the barns were brimming with grain. The kitchen and pantry were bursting with provisions. Thumbelina stood at the threshold like a beggar and asked for a piece of barley grain. She hadn't eaten anything for 2 days. "Oh, you poor thing," said the field mouse. She was, in fact, a kind old woman. "Come here, warm up, and eat with me." The mouse liked the girl and said, "You can stay with me all winter. Just clean my rooms well and tell me stories. I love them very much." And Thumbelina began to do everything the mouse commanded, and she began to live happily. "We'll probably have guests soon," said the field mouse one day. "My neighbor usually visits me once a week. He lives a much better life than I do. He has enormous halls and wears a wonderful velvet coat. If only you could marry him, you'd live a wonderful life. The only trouble is, he's blind and can't see you. But tell him the best stories you know." But the girl cared little for all this. She had no desire to marry her neighbor after all. It was a Molly. He did indeed soon come to visit. True, he wore a black velvet coat, was very rich and learned. According to the field mouse, his room was 20 times larger. But he didn't like the sun or the beautiful flowers at all, and spoke very ill of them. After all, he had never seen them. The girl had to sing, and she sang 2 songs. "Maybug, fly, fly," and the monk wanders through the meadows so sweetly that the mole fell in love with her. But he didn't say a word. He was such a dignified and respectable gentleman. The mole had recently dug a long underground passage from his home to the field mouse's door, and allowed the mouse and the girl to wander along it as much as they liked. The mole only asked them not to be alarmed by the dead bird lying there. It was a real bird, with feathers and a beak. It must have died recently, at the beginning of winter, and had been buried in the ground, right where the mole had dug his passage. The mole took a rotten piece of wood in his mouth in the dark. It's like a candle and walked forward, illuminating the long, dark passage. When they reached the spot where the dead bird lay, the mole poked a hole in the earthen ceiling with his broad snout, and daylight streamed into the gallery. In the very center of the gallery lay a dead swallow. Its pretty wings were pressed tightly to its body, its feet and head tucked into its feathers. The poor bird had probably died of the cold. The girl felt terribly sorry for it, for she loved these sweet little birds that had sung so beautifully to her all summer long. But the mole nudged the bird with his short paw and said, "I bet it doesn't whistle anymore. What a bitter fate to be born a little bird. Thank God my children have nothing to fear. All a bird like that can do is chirp you'll freeze in the winter." Yes, you're right. It's so nice to hear such wise words. What good does that chirping do? What does it bring to a bird? Cold and hunger in the winter? A lot. I can't say. Thumbelina said nothing, but when the mole and the mouse turned their backs on the bird, she leaned over, parted its feathers, and kissed its closed eyes. Perhaps this is the same one that sang so beautifully in the summer. How much joy you've brought me, my dear. Good bird. The mole plugged the hole in the ceiling again and escorted the ladies back. But the girl couldn't sleep that night. She got out of bed, wove a large, lovely carpet of dried grass, carried it to the gallery, and wrapped the dead bird in it. Then she found some down from a field mouse and covered the swallow with it, so it would be warmer as it lay on the cold ground. Farewell, my dear little bird. Farewell. Thank you for singing to me so beautifully in the summer, when all the trees were so green and the sun was so warm. And she laid her head on the bird's chest. But suddenly she became alarmed as something inside her began to pound. It was the bird's heart beating. It hadn't died, only grown stiff with cold. But now it had warmed up and come back to life. In autumn, swallows fly away to warmer climes, and if one is late, it will freeze to death, fall dead to the ground, and be buried in the cold snow. The girl trembled with fear. The bird was a giant compared to the little one, but she still gathered her courage, wrapped the swallow even more tightly, then ran and fetched a mint leaf, which she used as a blanket, and covered the bird's head with it. The next night, Thumbelina quietly crept back to the swallow. The bird had fully recovered, but was still very weak, and barely opened its eyes to look at the girl, who stood before it with a piece of rotten wood in her hands. It had no other lantern. "Thank you, my dear little one," said the sick swallow. "I'm so nicely warmed up. Soon I'll be completely well again and fly out into the sunshine again." "Oh," said the girl, "it's so cold now. It's snowing. Stay in your warm bed. I'll take care of you." And Thumbelina brought the bird some water in a flower petal. The swallow drank and told the girl how she'd hurt her wing on a thorn bush, and therefore couldn't fly away with the other swallows to warmer climes. How she'd fall into the ground. And, well, she couldn't remember anything else. And how she'd gotten here she didn't know. The swallow lived here all winter, and Thumbelina looked after her. Neither the mole nor the field mouse knew anything about this. They weren't fond of birds at all. When spring came and the sun warmed the sky, the swallow said goodbye to the girl, and Thumbelina unscrewed the hole the mole had made. The sun was so warm, and the swallow asked the girl if she would like to go with her, let her sit on her back, and they would fly into the green forest. But Thumbelina didn't want to abandon the field mouse. She knew the old woman would be very upset. "No, you can't," the girl said to the swallow. "Goodbye, goodbye, my dear, kind little one," said the swallow, and flew off into the sunshine. Thumbelina watched her go, and tears even came to her. She had grown so fond of the poor bird. "Keep, ke," the bird chirped and disappeared into the green forest. The girl was very sad. She wasn't allowed to go out into the sun at all, and the grain field was so overgrown with tall, thick ears of grain that it became a dense forest for the poor little thing. "In the summer, you'll have to prepare your dowry," the field mouse said to her. It turned out that a dull neighbor in a velvet coat had asked for the girl's hand. "You must have plenty of everything, and then you'll marry a mole and certainly won't want for anything." So the girl had to spin all day long, and the old mouse hired for spiders to weave, and they worked day and night. Every evening, the mole came to visit the field mouse, chattering on and on about how summer would soon be over. The sun would stop scorching the earth that had become like stone, and then they would get married. But the girl wasn't at all happy. She didn't like the boring mole. Every morning at sunrise and every evening at sunset, Thumbelina would emerge from the mouse hole. Sometimes the wind would push aside the tops of the ears of corn, and she would catch a glimpse of blue sky. "How bright! How wonderful it is out there," the girl thought, remembering the swallow. She longed to see the bird, but the swallow was nowhere to be seen. It must have been flying far, far away. In the green forest, by autumn, Thumbelina had her entire dowry ready. "Your wedding is in a month," the field mouse said to the girl. But the little one burst into tears and said she didn't want to marry a boring mole. "Nonsense," said the old mouse. "Just don't be capricious. or I'll bite you. See how white my tooth is. You'll have the most wonderful husband. The queen herself doesn't have such a velvet coat as his. And his kitchen and cellar are not empty. Thank God for such a husband. The wedding day arrived. The mole came for the girl. Now she had to follow him into his hole. Live there, deep, deep underground, and never come out into the sun. Noel couldn't stand it, and it was so hard for the poor little thing to say goodbye to the red sun forever. With the field mouse, she could at least admire it occasionally, and Thumbelina went out to look at the sun for the last time. The grain had already been harvested, and only bare, withered stalks were sticking out of the ground again. The girl stepped back from the door and stretched out her arms to the sun. "Farewell, my bright sunshine, farewell." Then she hugged the little red flower that grew there and said to it, "Give my regards to the dear swallow. If you see her, kiwi kiwi," suddenly rang out overhead. Thumbelina looked up and saw a swallow flying past. The swallow also saw the girl and was overjoyed, and the girl burst into tears and told the swallow how she didn't want to marry that nasty mole and live with him deep underground, where the sun never shines. "Soon the cold winter will come," said the swallow, "and I'm flying far, far away to warmer climes. Would you like to fly with me? You can sit on my back. Just tie yourself tightly with your belt end. We'll fly away, far from the nasty mole, far beyond the blue seas, to warmer climes where the sun shines brightest, where it's always summer and wonderful flowers bloom. Come fly with me, my dear little one. You saved my life when I was freezing in a dark, cold hole. Yes, yes, I'll fly with you," said Thumbelina, perching on the bird's back, bracing her feet against its outstretched wings, and tying her belt tightly to its largest feather. The swallow soared like an arrow and flew over dark forests, blue seas, and high snow-capped mountains. It was terribly cold here. Thumbelina buried herself in the swallow's warm feathers, only poking her head out to admire all the delights she encountered along the way. But here came warmer climes. The sun shone much brighter here, and green and black grapes grew near the ditches and hedges. Lemons and oranges ripened in the woods. The scent of myrtle and fragrant mint filled the air, and adorable children ran along the paths, catching large, colorful butterflies. But the swallow flew on, and the further she flew, the better it became. On the shore of a beautiful blue lake, amid green, curly trees, stood an ancient white marble palace. Grapevines twined around its tall columns, and swallows' nests nested high up under the roof. In one of them lived the swallow who had brought Thumbelina. "Here is my home," said the swallow. "Choose a beautiful flower for yourself down below. I'll plant you in it, and you'll have a wonderful life." "That would be wonderful," said the little one, clapping her hands. Large chunks of marble lay beneath the top of a column had fallen and broken into 3 pieces, with large white flowers growing between them. A swallow flew down and placed the girl on one of the wide petals. But what a wonder! In the very heart of the flower sat a tiny man, white and translucent, as if made of crystal. A beautiful golden crown shone on his head, glittering wings fluttered behind him, and he was no bigger than Wash, an elf. Every flower contains an elf, boy or girl, and the one sitting next to Thumbelina was the king of the elves himself. "Oh, how beautiful he is," Thumbelina whispered to the swallow. The little king was completely frightened at the sight of the swallow. He was so tiny and delicate, and she seemed like a real monster to him. But he was overjoyed to see our little one. He had never seen such a pretty girl, and he took off his golden crown, placed it on Thumbelina's head, and asked her name, and whether she would like to be his wife, Queen of the Elves, and Queen of the Flowers. Now that was a husband, not like the son of a toad or a mole in a velvet coat, and the girl agreed. Then elves flew out of each flower, boys and girls so pretty, they were simply adorable. They all brought gifts to Thumbelina. The best of them was a pair of transparent dragonfly wings. They attached them to the girl's back, and now she, too, could fly from flower to flower. What joy! And the swallow sat up in her nest, singing to them as best she could. But she herself was very sad. She had fallen deeply in love with the girl and wanted to stay with her forever. "You won't be called Thomalina anymore," said the elf. "It's an ugly name. And you're so pretty. We'll call ye Maya. Farewell, farewell," the swallow chirped and flew away from warmer climes. Far, far away she journeyed over vast oceans and green lands until she reached Denmark. There she had a small nest right above the window of a man. He was a master at telling stories. It was to him that she sang her quivit. And later, we learned the story.